Thank you. It's most appropriate that I have my book is titled "The Spy Who Stayed Out in the Cold," and I'm at the Cold War Museum. Of course, it's named that because, as most of you know, Robert Hanssen began spying for the Soviet Union full-time in 1985. And when the Cold War ended in 1991, December 26, if you want to pin a date on it, that's when he more or less stopped spying. But he stayed out because he began spying again. I'm going to start by reading the first two paragraphs of my book, and then I'll go into some of the things I learned in my research about Mr. Hanssen that hasn't been in the newspapers and hasn't been on television. Spying has been called the world's second oldest profession. Prostitution, of course, is the first. And if you think about it, the two occupations are not that dissimilar. A member of a brothel plies her trade first for the money and then for the interesting type of labor that is required and the thrills it sometimes offers. In the 21st century, the thrill often comes first for someone who chooses to spy either for or against his country. Compensation can be secondary, a way of measuring one's skills and worth to an employer. Ideology, the decision to risk one's life for a political belief, is now a distant third. The two careers can be illegal or legal. Prostitution's legality is determined by the jurisdiction in which the prostitute works. In the world of espionage, legality depends upon one's employers. Spy for your country, and you are a quiet, unsung hero. Spy for another nation, and you are a traitor, a monster. Getting caught while working for the wrong side can mean death. How can one explain Robert Hanssen, a man who had everything, a lovely wife, 6 wonderful children, son of a cop, a 30-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department, and a cop himself, 5 years? Now, how do you explain a guy like that? Well, let me try, and that's what I try to do in my book. Robert Hanssen was born on April 18th, 1944, in Chicago, inside the city limits. His father was a Chicago cop who had gone off to war in the Navy, so he was away when he was born. He came back shortly after the war ended and resumed his career as a cop. Both of Robert Hanssen's parents were in their 30s when he was born. He lived, and you can see the picture in the book, in a little 2-bedroom bungalow, very small. And after he was born, his grandmother on his father's side came to live with the family. They fixed up a little place in the attic for her. So there was Robert Hanssen, an only child, growing up in these cold Chicago winters, an only child living with 3 middle-aged adults. When you live like that, and you're alone, and your dad's away in the police force at all hours of day and night, you learn to develop and read. One of Robert Hanssen's first subscriptions when he was very young was to Mad Magazine. His favorite feature in Mad Magazine was, if you've ever read Mad Magazine, Spy versus Spy. Do you remember that was always in the back cover? The difference about Mr. Hanssen was he continued to most people give up Mad Magazine. I remember I did when you're about 16 years old, towards the end of high school. He continued to subscribe to it in college and beyond college. He had that sort of fantasy life. In high school, he was known as what they say today, a geek, the pocket protector guy. Had few friends, no dates, didn't have an active social life. And after he graduated from high school, he went 200 miles away to a college in Galesburg, Illinois, called Knox College. He was a chemistry major. When you're a chemistry major at Knox College, you have to take a language. He had the choice of 3 languages, German, Spanish, or Russian. You're right, he chose Russian. He took 2 years of Russian, grew to like the Russian literature and music, which was part of the course. And the really unusual part of that is he never told his mother or father that he was studying Russian. When he got out of Knox College, he applied for a job with the National Security Agency, NSA, out here in Fort Meade, Maryland. He didn't get the job. I'm sure they're very happy when they learned that too. So he didn't want to go to Vietnam. It was 66. And instead, he applied to the dental school of Northwestern University. There were 3,000 applicants that year, and there were 64 people accepted. He was one of those accepted. Robert Hanssen is, whatever you say, a very brilliant man, able to grasp a lot of, which is why he stayed undetected by the FBI for decades. He knew how to cover his tracks. So he went to dental school, and one of the people I interviewed, I interviewed about a dozen people who were in the dorm hall. He was in Abbott Hall at Northwestern. They saw him as much as the people in the FBI saw him. A bit of a strange duck, a bit of a strange person. His roommate, whose name is Jerry Takasano, told me that in dental school you have to do cadavers just like you do in medical school. And Bob Hanssen, although everybody else would go to college dressed much the way you are, casually, no tie and so forth, Bob Hanssen would wear the black suit, the white shirt, and the tie to school every day. He stood out because he was the only one wearing a suit to school. And when he did those cadavers, he kept his jacket on, the black jacket, and dissected them. They did it for 2 days. But when he came back to the room that he shared with his roommate, he hung up his jacket and pants and let it sit there. And his roommate told me that the formaldehyde was, smell was permeating the room, and Bob Hanssen was oblivious to all this. He just didn't do anything about it. So finally he had to beg him to take the dry cleaning, to take the suit out for dry cleaning, because he said he couldn't take it anymore. But Bob Hanssen had this life in college where he wouldn't say anything, but he would come up to a person, much as I'm told he did at the FBI, where he would just literally not say anything and just look at them and look superior. Bob Hanssen's 6'3", so it was easy for him to look down on people. He was very repressed then. I'm sure most of you have heard of the incident with the stripper on M Street, where he became her close friend and tried to save her and convert her to the ways of his church for over 2 years. But there was never any sexual contact, although she certainly tried. She certainly did her part, and spent $80,000 on her over 2 years. When he was in college, one of his dorm and the dental students all liked to go to this Greek restaurant after exams and have a sort of a celebratory dinner of couscous and baklava and that sort of thing. And but the main reason they really liked going to this Greek restaurant is it had a belly dancer. But because it had a belly dancer, Bob Hanssen was so depressed he was so repressed he wouldn't go with him. He wouldn't go to this, and they always thought that was sort of strange. He met his wife Bonnie in 1967 in Chicago. She had graduated from Loyola University, and she was working in the Chicago courts. He thought she looked exactly like Natalie Wood, and that was his reason for, he had a crush on Natalie Wood in the movies, so and she does look a little like Natalie Wood, so he asked her out. He was a Lutheran, she was a Catholic, he was an only child, she was one of 8 children. If opposites attract, they had something going, and she told her sisters from the start, "I'm not going to marry him. He's not even Catholic." But within a few dates, they were engaged, and she did marry him, and he immediately converted. They were married in a Catholic church.